So record, please.
Good evening and welcome to Coping with COVID's Headgame, Media 316 project here from Boise State University here in Boise, Idaho. Our hope with this project is to bring together some guests, some like-minded individuals, and maybe some students to share their insights, their thoughts, and some of the ways that they've been overcoming the challenges in dealing with the head game of COVID and kind of how mentally taxing it is. This evening, we're going to be joined by a friend of mine, Junior Gamino. He is a CNA at St. Luke's Hospital, local hospital here in downtown Boise, Idaho. He's a younger guy, a student our age, so I think he'll have a unique perspective that will work well for some of the younger folks, and hopefully some insight that really can help anybody at any stage who's dealing with this situation right now. Junior, thanks so much for joining us. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. First, thanks so much, Junior. I know you have a family member who is taken to the hospital yesterday, so I appreciate it. And who's in the hospital right now. So first, thank you so much for still making time for us. I really appreciate it. You didn't have to do that, and it's very gracious of you to do so. So thank you so much.
Of course.
Right off the bat, can you give us just a quick rundown of what your job entails being a CNA at St. Luke's?
Yeah, so my job title is actually clinical assistant personnel, which is more of a specialized nursing assistant at St. Luke's. I specifically work in the neonatal intensive care unit, so the closed off unit specifically where our patients are prematurity babies or they're just born with an illness, which we usually tend to manage in the ICU. Yeah.
How much has your job changed from just a year ago? Has it been very impactful, COVID, on the day-to-day work for you, or working in a hospital environment? Has it been sterile and clean? It always has and it always will. Has it changed day-to-day very much for you in your job?
That's a yes. Working in a hospital environment, it's definitely an environment that it'll keep you on your toes no matter what, pandemic or no pandemic. But recently with this pandemic, it has taken a toll on us for sure, on all healthcare workers. Uh, just more in the fact that we are being worked a little bit more because this at the beginning when this pandemic started, no one knew what to expect, and we were just seeing the mortality rate just increase. Specifically in the unit where I work at, though, since we are an enclosed unit, nothing much has changed other than the fact of our visiting policy. Usually, that entitles both parents are able to come in and see their baby. We also allow the immediate family come in as well, but just so we don't we don't have the virus being present within our unit just because our babies are immunocompromised, or sometimes we just don't even have an immunity system at all. We've implemented a policy where we're only allowing one parent at a time, and that's just within the day though. That doesn't mean that they can like swap in and out frequently. We just have to limit how many people are on our unit other than the babies themselves, the patients, and the healthcare workers, which is the doctors, the NPs, the CNAs, and our unit clerks.
You mentioned that with these limitations now, only one parent can come and go at a time. It sounds like, how challenging is it for you to have these types of conversations with brand new parents, and now you're restricting access to see their brand new little babies in a time that's already got to be so stressful, and now kind of adding to that stress? How do you handle those types of conversations?
Well, to put it bluntly, it sucks at the beginning. No one, if you were in that parent's shoes, you don't want to be told that you can't come in with your significant other, your wife or your husband, uh, to not be able to come in and see your baby together since you guys are a family. But we are trained to de-escalate those type of situations. We have to explain why the policy was implemented, how it benefits not only the patient, but the parents, and also the healthcare workers. Uh, but there are times though that it's a struggle, just because if it's a brand new parent and they just got the news that they have to do an emergency C-section just because of, let's say their baby had the umbilical cord tied around their neck, that can cause hypoxia or ischemia in this point. Uh, Parents are shocked. They don't know what to do. They think their baby's going to die. And there's just so much emotion going on, not only with them, but also with the healthcare workers too. So, uh, yeah, it can be difficult, but the main thing to keep aware of is try to have a smile, try to show that we're there for not only the patient, the baby, but also the parent as well. Show that we have sympathy for them, and just explain and try to de-escalate any situation as much as we can possibly can. And usually I'm in that type of situation, which kind of sucks on a daily. Uh, but my coworkers are awesome, and we just tend to alleviate each other's day-to-day pressures, which is pretty great, to be honest, because we all know exactly what unfolds on a day-to-day basis.
That's impressive that you have those skills to kind of de-escalate those situations, keep people calm, and just kind of give them the information they need and repeat it so they can um, understand it. And again, you're a CNA, so you certainly have some medical experience, but of course you're not a social worker licensed in any capacity, of course. One of the things that we kind of talked about in our pre-interview was that document put together from Amelia, who also works, Amelia Dottie Jones, who works in St. Luke's as well, that great packet on kind of COVID wellness. One section that we talked about in the self-assessment, kind of asking yourself those questions: do you tire more easily? Are you happy? Do you like your work? For a lot of folks, those may be questions that they have to ask themselves because maybe they're not as prominent. In your situation, it sounds like it's kind of just an ongoing thing, that absolutely you're tired and absolutely you're facing some of these challenges. So kind of in response to that, any of those categories that she listed, what are the things that you're doing that are helping you kind of overcome these stressors?
Yeah, so I guess it's with this whole self-assessment being listed. I think the main thing that I usually tend to focus on myself is more of like the physical aspect. Just because when I go home after a shift, and this doesn't pertain to just those that work in healthcare, working 12-hour night shifts or day shifts, but any other type of job, uh, being physical, doing exercise actually helps out a lot. When I go home, I don't immediately just take a shower and able to unwind right away. It takes time for me, especially since I've been doing night shifts. That's been a struggle for me. Uh,
So
but
just so is it just as important, you think, for folks who aren't working those overnight shifts? If you're, working at the local McDonald's, folks maybe at home are thinking, well, yeah, he's in a stressful environment, he's working overnight 12s, but if I'm flipping burgers, I mean, do you think these things are just as important, or how do you think they compare?
oh, for sure, because everybody deals with stress. The Well, hopefully, if you're human, you do deal with stress, because everybody just does. Not having stress kind of means you're a little bit dead inside, at least in the biological aspect. But yeah, just stress is a thing, and everybody just has to find coping mechanisms. Specifically with me, I love doing exercise, whether that's cardio or light weightlifting. And I usually do this right after a shift just because it helps me unwind. Because there are times where I'm too tired to feel tired enough to fall asleep. I'm exhausted from being exhausted. And yeah, you just need to find coping mechanisms. And some people, it may take one thing, it may take more of an emotional relief or physical relief, or even behavior relief, mentally relief, or mental relief.
So mentally, I want to jump off on that cognitive. She's got a section that she kind of talks about. Um, staying informed, having good sources, practicing psychological flexibility. In your job, you're kind of bombarded with COVID all the time, but some folks, they have the ability to kind of not let it affect them because maybe it hasn't really been present in their life. We talked about that article from last November, that gentleman who's the bar owner in downtown Boise, who was interviewed mentioning how he thought the CDC was kind of out of line. It wasn't really affecting him and his staff. And then fast forward a few months later in February, this same gentleman has been in your hospital 3 different times with COVID. And so can you talk a little bit about how you've dealt with situations like this, whether it's family members or friends of yours who just aren't dealing with it in the same way that you are, taking it as seriously until it, hits them like a ton of bricks? How do you kind of support those people who are having those that cognitive dissonance, those mental challenges, because they weren't prepared and now they need a little bit of help? Can you give some advice or some direction for those folks?
Yeah, so I guess it doesn't really hit reality for you until it hits home, and whether that's your own persona or a family or a loved one. Uh, this is a pandemic, a global pandemic, so it affects everybody. But once it starts hitting your environment around you, you tend to be more realistic and realize like, oh, this is a real thing. I have friends that text me on the weekends that we just want to go out or have a drink or even just have dinner together. But specifically where I work at with patients that are immunocompromised, I have to be really self-aware and know that not only am I putting myself in jeopardy, but those around me. And in this case specifically, it's family members that are immunocompromised in my own family or my patients for that matter. Uh, just like the CDC and the World Health Organization has implemented so many times over and over, 6 feet distance, wearing a mask, and even being kind to each other because no one really knows where anybody's at with their mental stability because they don't know how it's affecting them personally. So there's many factors, that's for sure, when it comes to this, especially with myself too.
I appreciate you mentioning the kindness factor, because as you said, the CDC, the 6 feet, the wearing the masks, these are things that we've kind of heard over and over the last year. And it's things that are important and it's going to keep us healthy. But specifically for this show, if we're talking about kind of COVID's Headgame and how it's affecting you mentally, I think that was great that you mentioned the kindness, trying to take care of each other, what that means to you and kind of what that means to other people, and showing them that grace and kindness, especially if they're, like you said, the friends who want to invite you out on the weekend and I guess still don't understand the type of job that you have and
Yeah.
where you're coming from. So that's great to hear. I appreciate they're able to still kind of show them that grace. That's wonderful.
Of course.
As I mentioned, you're a student as well, so you're younger. You don't have kids of your own yet. My producer put up that great slide, though, that showed a picture of your nephew. So just because you don't have kids yet certainly does not mean that you don't have a little loved one that you look after and take care of, which I sure know that you do. Any advice or direction you can give? Again, I know you're not a social worker, but you're certainly in that environment with stressed out parents who have little newborns and especially underdeveloped ones. Advice, direction, how you think they can kind of make a plan for the future. As you said, doesn't sound like COVID's going anywhere. So any advice you can give them?
Yeah, personally, if you want and have the means and the emotional support to have a child, go for it. Just be aware of your surrounding. And by that I mean be aware that we are in a global pandemic right now. COVID affects everybody. No one's special. No one's gonna be able to not get it eventually. This is a virus that's not gonna ever go away. It's gonna be with us. So what we can do is just learn, educate ourselves, not be closed-minded and adapt. But if you want a child, go for it. That's for sure. I'm not going to stop you with that aspect.
All right, well, I've got just a few more seconds here before I have to let you go. So if I have the means and I have the will and the desire to have a kid, but maybe I don't have the emotional or the mental support, where can I go? Do you have direction, advice? Where do I get some of that support if I feel like I don't have it?
Uh, and best way, honestly, you have your parents for a reason. They're always great people to go for because they had you, and I'm guessing they did want you to have. But your parents, elderly people, are always great to go for. You have counseling as well. That's a good one too. Whether that's someone that you have as a resource at your own work
And we'll be
environment.
sure to post that final slide at the end to give some folks some resources after the fact as well. So thanks again. I sure appreciate it. I wish we had a little more time to talk with you. And again, I know your time was valuable today. So thank you so much, Junior. I appreciate it. And you have a great evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah.